Hello and welcome to another episode of the DJ Project Criterion Collection. And in this episode we're going to talk about Spine 275, Tout, directed by Jean-Luc Godard and Jean-Pierre Gorin, 1972. Now before I get into it, something that I forgot to mention, this little ritual that I have when it comes to purchasing Godard. I wasn't able to do this with Contempt, but whenever I get a Godard title, because I knew that when I first got into Godard, I knew that I would like him, and so he became the director that I would end up getting a lot more titles, and other ones are more on the back burner, or that it was much slower for me to get additional titles. So whenever I get a Godard title, I try to get them in pairs, and I try to get one that's in black and white and the other in color. And if I can time it right, I try to do it to have them be as similar to each other as I can. The first time I did this with Band of Outsiders and A Woman is a Woman, and actually that was appropriate because they both involve Anna Karenina, and they both are more playful genre films. Band of Outsiders with the B mystery and or the B gangster film, and A Woman is a Woman is romantic comedy and romantic musicals. Another pairing would be more recently. I got both Vivre sa vie and Weekend, which they both fairly recently came out, and so you have one that's more of like a study of contrast, where one is the more humanist, and the other is very political, and actually leads very well into this film. And by the way, when I bought Tout, I also got Masculine and Feminine, which I also felt that were both very similar to each other in terms of themes. Okay, this is the period where Godard really becomes difficult, if he wasn't difficult already. And this is where he gets very political. Actually, it's not entirely the case. Where he gets intensely political is from 1968 to about this time, and any kind of films he made during those years were explicitly political, and it was all about making political points. He had no interest in making them commercial or making them appeal to a wide audience. So it was very much preaching to the choir. I think it's fair to say. I haven't seen any of the examples of these. I could be wrong, and I can be stand corrected if it can be shown to me as such. But I get the suspicion that, based on what I've read and based on what impressions I get, is that this is very much, these are films that make a point. But then starting around this time, he starts to tone down ever so gradually. This takes him a while. I think by the time he gets to the 80s, I think he's exorcised any and all political, or most of the overt politicism. There's always going to be politics with Godard, but the 70s is where the politics is the most potent, and this is an example of this moment where he still has this radical face, but also tries to pull back some stuff that he was doing in the 60s. Not necessarily the whole appeal thing, because I think he's probably at that point he really didn't give a damn about appealing to an audience, but having it be at the very least presentable and maybe go a little bit beyond the choir. And he was also working with Jean-Pierre Gorin, who was, I believe he was also interested in making more political films. I also could be wrong on this. So anyway, so this is radical Godard. This is political Godard. And really what the film is about, it's about political films. That's really what it is. There's not a... Although there is a... It's set up to be a film about these two characters that reflect political change. It's not really about them. It's more about bringing up issues and bringing them in a cinematic way. And the big thing that it deals with is how to deal with May 1968. May 1968 was a political moment that left an impression for all who lived through it, and most especially through Jean-Luc Godard. And I would say that there was a big... the change for Godard was, I think beforehand, he was anticipating some kind of revolution. I think there was a part of him that anticipated some kind of revolution or something big. And he saw it in '68, and he thought that it might have happened, but then it really didn't. You know, it was a very mixed bag, because if part of the point was to get de Gaulle to not be president of France anymore, it didn't quite work, because he held an election and got reelected by a landslide. But then he resigned a year. He stepped down a year afterwards, and then died subsequently thereafter. So it was kind of a mixed bag, and it was, you could see this as Godard coming to terms with '68 and what that means. And what that means is there's a lot of critiques, and to his credit, it's not just the usual things that one can critique, whether it be the consumerist society, whether it be the bourgeois, whether it be capitalism. But it's also, he also criticizes the established left, the workers' unions, and the Communist Party. But I think the criticism is more that they've abandoned their mission, and they seem to be more bedfellows with the enemy, and that aspect of it does come through. Now, what do I take out of all of this, given what I've mentioned fairly vaguely about with politics? Actually, honestly, this reminds me of why I don't like modern society in general. Because pretty much everything about it sucks. For all kinds of reasons. And I think that's the thing. It's not that I prefer one side to the other. It's just, I just think that everybody sucks. And this is a nice little reminder of that. As far as presentations, it's, like I said, it's very, I mean, this is characteristic of Godard. It's very reflexive and very meta. In fact, the very beginning is, after the credits roll, you have a disembodied voice, or this disembodied dialogue between a man and a woman. And the man says, "I want to make a film." And the woman goes, "Well, first you need money." And then there's a shot where it's a close-up of a hand signing checks, and it's supposed to go out to different people. It goes out to the director. It goes out to it goes to the screenwriter. It goes to the production designer. It goes to film labs and the film stock and all these different elements of what makes up a film. And they're just, you see the checks and it's signed, and then it's just torn out and then given away. And then the next one is like, well, if you have stars in your film, then people will give you money for this. And the stars is Avis Montan, who was in Z, and Jane Fonda. So, yeah, already I'm gonna like this. And they're supposed to play a couple, Both of them politically active, both of them trying to be more creative in their fields and kind of disenchanted with things, but obviously for different reasons. Yes, you could argue that the he character, Montaigne's character, is somewhat of a stand-in for Godard. Not in everything. I don't think Godard ever made commercials for Remington, but some of the stuff, I think some of the stuff he says, it does sound much more like Godard, like a Godard stand-in, or that he's infusing himself into that character. And one of the things, and it's just, it's not, don't expect a narrative out of this. It's really just these, I mean, it plays out like as if, I think the best way to describe it is it feels like a brainstorm of someone trying to make a film about politics and political changes, particularly in France, particularly after May 1968. And it's basically, okay, what can we do? How can we do this? And this one extended sequence happens in the beginning where the couple, they go to a meat factory, or a meat processing plant, I should say, and they're supposed to be interviewing with the manager, but unbeknownst to them, there's this strike that actually led to a kind of labor insurrection, and they actually locked the manager into his office and says that he cannot come out. And because they were there to see him, they end up getting locked inside with them. And so it's these workers taking over this factory. And one of the things about the offices, it's designed as this, it looks like an ant farm set. And in fact, actually, if you've seen The Life Aquatic, there's a similar setup where you have the Belafonte ship, and it's this cross section, and then everybody kind of goes in this room. So it ends up looking like a little ant farm. And sure enough, there's this little ant farm office, and there's a moment where the camera just looks at it, and you see this cross section of the building, and it tracks over, and you see everybody in the rooms and such. And so, making it very clear that yes, this is an artifice. This is not an office building. And infused in that, there's these sort of comic scenes. One moment where this one moment where the manager is desperate to take a piss, and is mocked by the workers, and it's to make a point about how limited and punishing the restroom breaks are for the workers. So it's a case where, you know, if you've done this onto us, we're going to do this onto you. Not quite the best way to practice the golden rule, but this is why it's called the golden rule, the real golden rule, not what passes for it. But anyways, and so it becomes kind of a, you know, straight out of Buñuel. That's kind of what it feels like. It feels, and actually the funny thing is this came out the same year as The Street Charm of the Bourgeoisie. so yeah, it was all in the air. But at any rate, but there's other points where some of the workers and also a union representative who comes in is actually mad that the workers did this little insurrection thing, because it's getting in the way of the negotiations that he's trying to do with management. And of course the workers considers him a traitor to the cause, because you're just trying to cut a deal with the management. But again, my view is that modern society sucks. I don't care which side, you all suck. But there's a few moments where the workers do these. They talk to the camera, and it's like they're being interviewed, and you have these long stretches of them talking and sort of stating their points, and sometimes it can try your patience, especially if you're not used to that. So there's other little things. I will say that the part of the film that I still like from it is, I call this the supermarket as a microcosm. This is the penultimate scene towards the end. It's it's inside this supermarket, which I think it's more characteristic of European, but for Americans it's actually no different than going inside a Costco or a Walmart or a Target or a Sam's Club, any of those places where it's not just food, but you can get like all kinds of stuff in there. And all it is, it's this lateral tracking shot from behind the cashier racks. And it's looking out into the supermarket. So you see these aisles of food and out there, and then it's just this long track. And I would say it goes on for about, I think like the length of it is at least 100 yards, maybe even like 200. But it's this really lengthy shot. But it's this scene that continuously plays, and then at certain points the camera stops and it focuses on an action, and then it contracts back, and it's just all done with this tracking shot. And I call this the supermarket as a microcosm because in the beginning you see everybody in this supermarket, they have their carts and they're paying for their purchases, and then in the middle of it is this little stand that's set up, and it's for the French Communist Party that's selling their pamphlets. $4.75 marked down from $5.50. So isn't it supposed to be free or something like that? Anyways, and so it continues on, and then you see these group of students that come running in, and they're supposed to symbolize the youth of, I take it to be as the youth of '68, and they all come in and they eventually end up in the table, and the camera slowly tracks back, and they're all gathered in there. And one of the students is asking a question from the book. He wasn't sure about a certain sentence, and the guy selling the books doesn't give him an answer. Everybody's upset, and the group is all upset with him with this. It's like, you're not, I mean, he asked you a question, you should be able to, and they also asked, well, did you write this? Yes. Well, you should be able to answer it. And, you know, are you really an ideal? Are you a militant? Yes, I'm a militant. And then it goes on. And then it continues tracking over. And then what starts happening is, I think this is where the students really take it to radical extremes. Instead of trying to be all nice and formal with stuff, they just say, oh, the hell with it. Let's just raise anarchy. And they start convincing the customers that are still in front of the... All this is going on while people are still paying for their items, and they all go to the people who are standing in line to check out their items, say, oh, it's all free, and take them all in. And so they convince them to, you know, not go through the cashier line and to pay for their stuff and just walk out of the room. And as the camera tracks back, you see more of these people going in, and then eventually the police show up, and they break the riot, and then they start. There's violence ensues, and that's supposed to be like the May '68 affair. So, again, supermarket as a microcosm, and it's a very clever scene, and I like how it plays out. It's very interesting. You may or may not agree with some of it, but again, I seriously, I mean, I look at this and I just go, you know what, this says everything of why I do not like, why I don't like modern politics, why I don't like most, if not all, modern political philosophies. I don't like the way the debates are set up. I don't like the way issues are argued. I don't like the stances that people take, and also the conclusions people reach, where basically you become more and more like a jerk, and you just become more defensive, and you end up like perpetuating the problem. It ends up being one of those things where the cure ends up being worse than the disease, or or you actually it's not even you're treating the disease. You're just letting it continue, and it's just really, really frustrating. It's like you're needlessly frustrating yourself. You're in this situation you don't like. You make it clear that you don't like this, and yet you seem to keep doing the things that keeps you stuck in that position in the first place. So really, personally, that's what I get out of this. I know other people don't get this out of it too. There are those that will find it very boring. They will find it very frustrating. And again, this is where I think this is Godard at probably his most inaccessible and his most radical. And pretty much everything you don't like about Godard is in full display right here. So if you don't like the reflexivity, if you don't like the meta commentary, if you don't like the politics, if you don't like or if you don't like the eschewing narrative and using lots of little devices and tricks and drawing attention to yourself, drawing attention to the fact that this is all artifice, you'll definitely not like this film. I would say that if you're getting into Godard, I would not recommend this as a first film. See some of his other films first before you get into it. Like Breathless and Band of Outsiders and Viva Sa Vie and Weekend. Actually, Weekend. I would probably recommend Weekend a bit more than this one. Although the funny thing is that Tout va bien, which translated from French is everything's okay or everything's all right, is actually a little bit toned down compared to Weekend. Weekend is probably the most intense in terms of its politics, and certainly in your face, and there's also some other little gruesome moments in there. This one's a little bit more toned down, and I think probably part of it is that whereas Weekend was made kind of in the wake of May '68, this was made a few years after, and so it's a slightly more contemplative. Slightly. He doesn't get full-on contemplative until the 80s onwards. And again, the only films of his that I saw in that period was in 2004 with Notre Musique, but I haven't seen I haven't seen any of his 80s or 90s films. But so yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend this as a first Godard. Again, go for Breathless or Viva Sa Vie. But if you see those films and Godard does not piss you off. Then you can go for Tout va bien and then kind of see it from there. So yeah, Tout va bien. And well, no, not everything's all right, but what the hell. And until next time, take care.